don't tread on me, and the snake flag and everything. Well, now it's like, if it's ICE doing it, they're like licking the boot and saying, tread harder, daddy. Guys, happy to be here and talking with you all again today, but I do wish it was under slightly better circumstances, because the story we have to focus on today for most of the episode, though not exclusively, we'll talk about some other stuff as well, is the horrific killing of a man, an emergency room nurse, or I think an ICU nurse, actually, in Minnesota, amid the ongoing ICE crackdown in the state from the Trump administration that's being met with a lot of resistance. And of course, these videos have gone viral of his death. It is very hard to see what exactly happened from some of these blurry footage, but I will point you guys to a pretty comprehensive frame-by-frame analysis that the Wall Street Journal commissioned and published that I'm going by to try to figure out what happened here and what didn't. But I think we do know enough. Of course, in any kind of tragic shooting like this, we need a thorough investigation, and it should actually be done by an outside agency, not by the DHS itself. It should be done by the FBI typically, but instead DHS is saying they're going to investigate it themselves, which I don't think is good. But anyway, I think obviously we need an investigation, but to me it's pretty clear that this is an unjustified shooting. You know, there were so many ICE agents pinning him down to the ground, and the fact that they couldn't restrain him without shooting him, I think there were 10 shots, according to this Wall Street Journal breakdown, all of which came after he had been disarmed, because this man did have a permit and was carrying a firearm, but he did not brandish it or aim it at officers or anything else, which would justify him being shot. Anyway, he was legally carrying a firearm. He didn't have his ID. Some people pointed that out, but that's a petty misdemeanor. He had the permit, and he never used it as a weapon or anything like that. But simply just because this guy is presumably on the left, and ICE and Trump administration is like, I don't know, I guess some people feel the need to blindly defend anything they do. We unfortunately have a number of high-profile MAGA influencers doing what I think is kind of defending the indefensible. And I'll start here with Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire, who, of course, some people dredged up his old tweets that directly contradict what he's saying now. And I always find that fascinating when that happens. But let's read his first post here. An armed leftist went out with a gun to deliberately interfere with legitimate law enforcement operations, and I'm seeing some quote-unquote conservatives on this site claim that it might be ICE's fault that the guy is now dead. Insane. Some of you people will never effing learn. I want to unpack this because I think there's a couple pieces of it that are factually false. So if you start at a factually false premise, then you're going to reach a flawed conclusion. One of this is an armed leftist went out with a gun to deliberately interfere with legitimate law enforcement operations. So based on the Wall Street Journal review, like I linked, it actually appears to me that this guy went to go film and observe ICE, which is perfectly legal and is not interfering with them. And that what happened then, and you can see this in some of the videos in this Wall Street Journal frame-by-frame analysis, they include all the videos they consulted, is that an ICE officer ran up and pushed a woman that he may have been with, the man who was killed. And then Alex Preddy, the man who was killed, the 37-year-old man, stepped in between the officers with his hands up, trying to de-escalate the situation. But I've seen a lot of rhetoric about how he attacked law enforcement or impeded law enforcement or anything like that. I don't think that's an accurate reflection of what happened. And then the fact that he is armed is interesting because it's not super relevant in that he never used his weapon in a dangerous way. And throughout my whole career, conservatives, and I've agreed with them on this, have believed that people have a right to concealed carry a firearm, to bring a firearm out in public with a permit. And he never used it in a dangerous way or aimed it at an officer or did anything like that. So to kind of victim blame the guy who was killed in what I think is likely an act of manslaughter, if not murder, because he had a gun, seems like a weird conservative take. Well, he was armed, so it's really his fault that the police murdered him when 8 of them had him pinned to the ground after he'd been disarmed. Really, Matt Walsh? That's what we're going with? That's what we're sticking to? And I have more thoughts on this and a couple more posts from Matt Walsh, as well as his old posts that are being dredged up to push back on him, and some of those aged like milk. First, though, guys, do make sure to subscribe. Do hit the like button if you haven't yet. And do consider becoming a channel member to support my content. I try to call out the far left and the far right and just give you an honest, independent perspective. But the easiest way to make it big on YouTube and get rich is to just pander to the left or just pander to the right. I don't do that, so I need support from viewers like you. So do hit the join button or check out the link in the comments or the description. To become a channel member today, you will unlock early access to ad-free episodes with none of those annoying mid-roll ads, YouTube ads spamming and interrupting you in the middle of my sentences. Those are disabled for members on the members only feed. So do consider becoming a channel member. You'll unlock early access and you'll avoid that annoyance. Just check it out down below. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about this Matt Walsh tweet, because remember, he says that he's basically saying, well, it's this guy's fault that he's dead because he went out to interfere with ICE while having a firearm. I've already talked about, I don't think he did anything wrong in terms of interfering. I don't think he did anything wrong simply by having a firearm. Maybe it wasn't the wisest decision in the world to make, but it's not illegal. As we will come to, this has been investigated and it is perfectly legal under Minnesota law for him to have a firearm at a protest. Anyway, Matt Walsh, though, his tweet seems to suggest that, like, no matter what happened, ICE would be justified to kill this guy. So, like, everything in his tweet could be where he's saying, like, oh, well, he went out to interfere, he had a gun, so of course it's not ICE's fault. What if they literally disarmed him, pinned him down, the situation was totally constrained, and they just executed him? That would still all apply. So clearly that wouldn't be justified. No sane or moral person would think that was justified. So whatever point he's trying to make here doesn't really work. You still have to grapple with the question of whether this was a legally justified use of lethal force against an American citizen. And in order for it to be legally justified, the officers would have to reasonably have believed that they were in imminent danger and that lethal force was therefore justified. I don't see how you can say that when you have like 8 officers pinning him to the ground. There's no gun in his hand. There's nothing suggesting he's about to shoot someone or kill someone. How is there any reasonable estimation that they are in imminent danger? I don't see it. And I think that they ultimately should face accountability and ultimately potential prosecution for what they did to this man, whether you support him or not, whether you agree with him politically, whether you support the ICE officers and their broader mission to deport people is not relevant to whether an American citizen was exercising his rights and was murdered by law enforcement. And here, this is where I will have to read one of Matt Walsh's old tweets that has been dredged up amid this whole controversy because it sort of goes against what he's saying now. He wrote, "Gotta love that particular breed of quote-unquote small government conservative who goes on and on about abuses of power and even claims he owns guns so he can resist the tyranny of the state and yet will defend police literally no matter what they do." Oh, Matt. You see how that's kind of what you've become and what you're doing in this exact situation. A few years ago, you got it. I believe that tweet was from 2020. You sort of got it then, that actually if you believe in, it's the right, we've heard from the right, and I've always generally agreed with the thrust of this message, like, don't tread on me and the snake flag and everything. Well, now it's like, if it's ICE doing it, they're like licking the boot and saying, tread harder, daddy. That's what I'm hearing from you, Matt Walsh. Tread harder, daddy, instead of don't tread on me, just because it's ICE and just because they're treading on Democrat citizens who are having their constitutional rights violated. Yeah, that's not how it works. If you have any true guiding principles, rather than just wanting to own the libs at any cost and be controversial for controversial's sake, which is what I think Matt Walsh really does, is I think he's a bit of a shock jock and an edgelord, and he just wants to take an extreme position that he knows will ruffle feathers, but a lot of people do agree with him. I'm seeing kind of a schism actually right now in Republican and conservative media between people who are just blindly defending ICE in the shooting and people who, many of whom voted for Trump, many of whom want mass deportation. They're not abolish ICE, crazy lefties, but think this was a bad shooting and not okay. And that these agents, if they can't subdue somebody, like 8 of them versus 1, without executing him and shooting him 10 times after he's been disarmed, or at least firing 10 shots after he's been disarmed, or a significant number of shots at least, though I believe it said 10 in the Wall Street Journal report, but obviously these things are all still in flux. yeah, they're probably not being trained well enough, or there's something wrong in that situation. And it doesn't make you like a traitor or a leftist to acknowledge that fact. In fact, it actually, if your ultimate goal is to have law enforcement enforce federal law successfully and engage in mass deportations, then you shouldn't want it done in such a haphazard way that's going to cost human life and understandably prompt enormous backlash. But I don't think he thinks that far ahead. I think he just thinks about what can I say that will annoy people and then does it. So I want to also read you a post from the far-right influencer Jack Posobiec, and he wrote on X after all this was breaking, "Do you know what's also a good way to not get shot by the cops? Stay home instead of coming out and interfering with ICE." I mean, I don't agree, first of all, that what this guy did was interfering with ICE. I think he went to observe and record ICE, which is legal, is protected by the First Amendment, and frankly, is helpful because without all these people recording, we wouldn't even know what really happened in many of these dangerous situations, and it's important to hold government officials to account. However, even let's grant the premise that he did interfere with ICE in some way, so therefore he forfeits his life. I don't think Jack Posobiec would apply that logic to Ashley Babbitt or to any of the January 6th rioters who went to the Capitol. And if they had all just gotten shot and mowed down the cops, would his take have been, you know what a good way to not get shot by the cops is? Don't show up to the Capitol and riot. Stay home. Like, I don't think so. And I'm sorry, but people do have a right to protest. Obviously, nobody should obstruct law enforcement. And I do think it's dangerous the way that some progressives and Democratic officials are essentially encouraging that or egging that on. And when people do try and do that, they should be arrested, but they don't forfeit their right to life, their sacred human right, and their fundamental dignity as human beings. They still have constitutional rights, and the police still can't execute them absent a narrow, imminent fear of their life in danger that would justify lethal force. And in any instance, you still have to examine whether that was justified. Otherwise, law enforcement, masked law enforcement, who we don't know who they are and already struggle to hold them accountable as is, are just can just kill anyone who shows up to protest? How is that somebody who supports free speech or the Second Amendment or any of these things people like Jack Posobiec have said for years they believe in? But you forfeit your life if you go to a protest against the government. Excuse me? No, actually, that's not how this works. Another tweet here. This is from Blaze TV host Sarah Gonzalez. "Today is Sunday, January 25th, 2026, and I'm still safe from being killed by ICE because I'm not an effing moron who pulls a gun on federal law enforcement officers." Then she put a salute emoji and American flag emoji. Yeah, it's actually kind of gross to me to see you put American flag emoji while like lying on the name and dancing on the grave of an American who was just murdered and actually like spitting in the face of basic American foundational constitutional principles like free speech and the Second Amendment, because you're also just like lying. Obviously, if somebody pulled a gun, which refers to drawing a weapon and brandishing it or aiming it at federal law enforcement and they get shot, then that's almost certainly a justified use of lethal force. And I mean, at that point, you kind of have put yourself in a dangerous situation. So I could understand not feeling sympathy for somebody who did that. But that's literally not what happened here. He never pulled the gun. The Wall Street Journal frame by frame analysis reveals that he never actually had the gun in his hand or brandished it in any way, despite the federal government originally claiming otherwise, which of course we will get to some of their botched response over this. But yeah, I just think it's shameful that you as a conservative commentator would spread to hundreds of thousands of people online false information. And then regardless, like just speaking about the death of your fellow citizen in such a cavalier way is something I can't understand. I really can't. Even if, like, for example, in the Renee Good situation, there are people, which was the previous one, where she had blocked traffic with her car and then tried to drive away and maybe hit the officer, maybe not, but maybe driven right at him. There were people on either side of that issue who, listen, they have more of a pro-law enforcement starting point. They think that shooting was justified, but they still spoke about it in a way that acknowledged that this woman, the loss of her life is a tragedy. They didn't mock her and say, "Fafo, LOL, got what was coming for you." And I can respect those people. We can have a difference of opinion about whether a particular use of lethal force by law enforcement was justified. But once you start like glibly posting about your fellow citizens' deaths at the hands of their own government, Yeah, I just lose respect for you. And I find that to be really gross and irresponsible. Even if you do hold the position, even if you want to make a case that this shooting is justified, okay, we can have that conversation. But don't call the dead guy an effing moron and lie about what he did. That puts you in the situation where you are now the bad guy. You are now toxifying, and worsening the discourse, in my opinion. And so is basically every Trump administration official that opened their mouth to speak about this in the immediate aftermath. Because God forbid we just say, like, listen, any loss of life is a tragedy. We're going to do a full, thorough, impartial investigation, get to the bottom of what happened here. Everyone needs to calm down. Don't interfere with law enforcement. And of course, our law enforcement need to stick to their training and only use lethal force when it's absolutely necessary. But we will get to a full accounting of the facts. No, what they decided to do, the Trump administration officials, was immediately rush in front of cameras and make a bunch of false or totally unsubstantiated claims about the shooter, and make a bunch of wrong statements about the Second Amendment as well. So first, here is FBI Director Kash Patel on television speaking about this. Listen to what he said, because it's just objectively wrong.
As Kristi said, you cannot bring a firearm loaded with multiple magazines to any sort of protest that you want. It's that simple. You don't have that right to break the law and incite violence. We will, of course, always protect your First Amendment speech. And if you peacefully protest, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But you have seen a trend here, not just in Minnesota, but across the country, in these protests turning into violent scenarios and people attacking law enforcement. That's when you go over the line, and that's when law enforcement steps in.
What on earth is this dude babbling about? Everything he just said has literally no bearing on the death of Alex Pretty, which is what he was discussing, because none of that happened. Alex Pretty did not attack law enforcement. That's a lie. He maybe shouldn't have stepped up and tried to shield, and he put his hands up and stood between an ICE officer and a woman that that ICE officer had run up and shoved to the ground, but he didn't attack the officer. And then you actually are totally allowed to carry a firearm out in public, including out in terms of a protest. That's completely legal. And it is not inciting violence. He did nothing to incite violence. So I'll read you the community note that got fact-checked on this viral clip. Under the Second Amendment and Minnesota Statute 624714, permit holders may legally carry firearms in public, including during protests. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that public carry is a constitutional right. Carrying a firearm does not legally constitute inciting violence. So call me crazy, but I actually think it's really bad and really dangerous for the FBI director to go on national television in the aftermath of the death of a U.S. citizen at government hands and blatantly lie about what happened and totally misstate the situation and federal law and our Second Amendment rights. God forbid we expect our top law enforcement to actually know how our Constitution and laws work before running their mouths after somebody was just killed. What in the amateur hour is this? Why is this person the FBI director if he can't conduct himself with any sort of dignity or coherency in the aftermath of an incident like this? Serious questions need to be asked about this kind of thing, especially about the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, who, wow, the way she has handled this, coming just weeks after how she botched the handling of the Renee Good situation, also in Minneapolis or in Minnesota. Here is what she had to say in the aftermath of Alex Pretty's death, where she made some pretty extravagant claims based on absolutely nothing about his intentions. Let's take a listen.
Individual approached U.S. Border Patrol officers with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. The officers attempted to disarm this individual, but the armed suspect reacted violently. Fearing for his life and for the lives of his fellow officers around him, an agent fired defensive shots. Medics were on the scene immediately and attempted to deliver medical aid to the subject, but he was pronounced dead at the scene. The suspect also had 2 magazines with ammunition in them that held dozens of rounds. He also had no ID. This looks like a situation where an individual arrived at the scene to inflict maximum damage on individuals and to kill law enforcement.
Me when I make shit up? What do you mean this looks like a... She just suggested that it seemed like Alex Pretty, the guy who was just killed in Minnesota, that he showed up as if he was going to do a mass shooting of law enforcement, that's a lie. There's absolutely no evidence that's been provided of that. And as you will see, she doesn't or can't offer any. He didn't have his gun out. He showed up to peacefully record ICE operations, which is a First Amendment protected right. And then ICE officers really escalated the situation and started shoving a woman to the ground. He then, Alex Pretty, did step up and stand between the officer and the woman and put his hands up, but he didn't attack them. He certainly never took out his gun. It was concealed carry. It wasn't out. He never brandished it. He never simply tried to shoot any officers. And there's no evidence that he went there with the intention to harm them. And simply carrying a gun and some ammunition is not evidence of intent to commit a mass shooting. Millions of people do that every day. Heck, I walk around with my brother-in-law in a restaurant in Michigan where he has a permit and he's strapped and he has some magazines. And guess what? He's not going to hurt anyone, that he's just exercising his Second Amendment right, including in the frickin' grocery store. It's like, this is a total detachment from reality. And for you, as the secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, to be hopping on in front of a microphone and a camera after a citizen was just killed by your forces and to be lying about him or making insane accusations is totally irresponsible. We actually need to be able to trust our government officials in the aftermath of high-tension incidents or natural disasters or anything like that, that they are giving us real information. Not speculating, not saying random BS, not making wild accusations. Remember, Kristi Noem did this with Renee Good in that situation, which even if you somehow do think that's a legally justified shooting, okay, we could have that conversation. She suggested Renee Good was a domestic terrorist. That's an obvious lie. There's no evidence or basis for that. And here she is doing the same thing again about a man who was just killed. It's truly disgraceful. And even Fox News pressed her on this and asked her for some evidence to back up this claim that she made, that this man was somehow going there to massacre law enforcement. And listen to the evidence that she provided.
And it is early, we know, in this investigation into the shooting death of Alex Pretty. But I want to have you walk our audience through what exactly you know. So you said last night, it looks like a situation where an individual arrived at the scene to inflict maximum damage on individuals and to kill law enforcement. Did he say, I'm going to kill you, or did he leave a note? How do you know that was his intent?
You know, part of this investigation will be hearing from those agents and officers and people on the ground. But we do know that he came to that scene and impeded a law enforcement operation, which is against federal law. It's a felony. When he did that, interacting with those agents, when they tried to get him to disengage, he became aggressive and resisted them throughout that process. These officers used their training, followed their protocols, and were in fear of their lives and the people around them. And that's how this tragedy unfolded, and we hope we never see it again. It grieves me to think about what his family is going through, but it also grieves me what's happening to these law enforcement officers every day out on the streets with the violence.
How can they be defensive shots if they shot him after he'd been disarmed and while he was being pinned to the ground by like 8 grown men? That's simply not believable to me at all. But more importantly, Kristi Noem in this clip was asked for evidence after she went before the cameras and stated that Alex Pretty had showed up with the intention to massacre law enforcement. She made that bombshell claim about a man who'd just been killed. And she was asked, what proof do you have of this? And provided absolutely none. Simply saying that he had a firearm. That's allowed. That's his constitutional right. She claimed that he impeded federal law enforcement. I don't think that's necessarily true. Either way, it's not evidence of intent to commit a mass shooting. I think it is wild that you actually have a cabinet official repeatedly going up and saying things to the public about life and death incidents where people have just lost their lives that are totally baseless and unproven and untrue. And frankly, it's terrible look even for the Trump administration and even for any attempt to further their goals of actually implementing this agenda, because the polls are moving against ICE and moving against the Trump administration on this. The American public is horrified by these scenes and is losing faith and trust in these officials when they go up and make unsubstantiated or unproven or brazen lies. Like, this isn't okay. And Trump should fire her and honestly put someone in charge who isn't just going to behave so recklessly and pop off and spout off. And if he doesn't fire her, Congress should impeach her. Honestly, you can't betray the public trust like this and expect to remain in such an important position. At least you shouldn't be able to. At least not in a society with standards and decency. And none of this depends on whether you support ICE or whether you want mass deportation or you don't. We should all demand transparency and honesty from our elected officials and their representatives. And it is actually the bare minimum that you don't lie about dead Americans in the immediate aftermath of their killing when you are a cabinet secretary of the United States federal government. And gosh, everything is just so amateur hour and so out of control right now. They really got to get a grip and do better than this. And I'm sorry to all the MAGA influencers who are twisting themselves into pretzels, trying to justify some of this. Good luck with that, because they're going to keep making you stretch and stretch and stretch and contort yourselves into bizarre shapes until your spine just breaks from bending over backwards to try to stay in their good graces. It's so much easier, guys, if you just join the dark side and start telling the truth, giving your honest opinion. Stop carrying water for Team Red or Team Blue. Join me. Seriously, it's so freeing. But hey, whatever. Maybe the access or the audience capture is worth it. I truly don't know. You guys will have to let me know what you think of all this. I think I've made my thoughts pretty clear, but I'll probably do some additional coverage as more facts come out through the week, and potentially some debates or panels about it as well. Let me know what you think of all of this in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe to the like button, and do consider becoming a channel member to support my work.